everyone to please close their eyes. Imagine yourself living within the civil rights era. You are a person of color, attending a prestigious, historically black university, North Carolina A&T. Your professor asks for volunteers to participate in an intense silent protest. You go through intense training to mentally prepare yourself for what's going to happen during the protest. It is now the day of the protest. You and your classmates walk into the whites-only entrance and proceed to sit at the front counter. With your face trained to make no reaction, you feel a push on your back. You feel spit on your shoulder. And contents of food is smeared and smashed on your face. You may open your eyes. The scene I just described is one of the most iconic peaceful protests during the civil rights era. Good afternoon. My name is Hogue, and I will be informing you about the realistic viewpoint of how influential and proactive sit-in protests were used during the civil rights movement. So after taking an American history class my sophomore year of high school, I've learned that sit-ins were the most intense silent protests during this era. To begin, I will explain what a lunch counter sit-in is. Students from across the country came together to form the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and it organized sit-ins at counters throughout the South. These groups became the grassroots organizers of future sit-ins at lunch counters, wait-ins at segregated pools, and pray-ins at white-only churches. By sitting in protest at an all-white lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, 4 college students sparked national interest in the push of civil rights. The Greensboro Four. 4 young black men who staged the first sit-in in Greensboro, North Carolina. Ezell Blair Jr., David Richmond, Franklin McCain, and Joseph McNeil. These 4 politely asked for service. Their request was refused, and when asked to leave, they remained in their seats. There was no need to retaliate, as that's what whites expected. Blacks wanted to show that they were respectful, well-rounded people who deserved equal respect and equal rights. The Greensboro sit-ins were a series of nonviolent protests in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1960, which led to the Woolworth department store chain removing its policy of racial segregation in the South of the United States. Now, these protests weren't the only protests that happened during the civil rights era. There were marches, there were speeches, and then there were the violent protests that were needed. So these sit-in protests were just to show that they are just like any other human in the room, that they were able to act civilized as anyone else. They were not monsters, they were not evil. They were just as anyone else. As I come to my conclusion, the need to inform you how we are all to come congregated together is the most important. These protests led to how we interact with each other today. We can now sit amongst our peers in a civilized manner, and I am legally able to go into a public place and not receive discrimination for how my skin color is presented. As a high school student in the 21st century who has never experienced the intensity of the civil rights protests in the South, I can say the sit-ins were the most influential and proactive. Thank you.